All right, my friends, I think I'm about to take you for a ride. I think this is a Herculean task for a teacher to try to lay out the family tree of Herod the Great, but let's take a shot. So strap on your seatbelts and we'll try to walk you through what happened with Herod's family. So, of course, we have to start with Herod the Great. Herod the Great lived from 73 BC to about 4 BC. He was an excellent diplomat, an excellent administrator, wonderful builder. All across the land of Palestine, we have these fortresses that he built with quick communication systems, and he rebuilt the temple in Jerusalem. And yet he's an incredible autocrat, an incredible despot. The things that he did in order to maintain power, to manipulate power, and his unaccountability led, I think, eventually to his death. So let's talk a little bit about what comes after that. Herod had 10 wives, probably 15 grandchildren. And so we're going to talk about 4 of them here. We've got Doris, his first wife, and then Mariamne I, Mariamne II, and Malthace. And we'll talk about each of them and how they contribute to Herod's family. And when they relate to the biblical text, we'll make those connections as well. So let's talk about his first wife. She had a son, Antipater, who plotted against 2 of his rival stepbrothers, Alexander and Aristobulus, children of Mariamne I, and he plotted to have them killed, and they were indeed killed by Herod as a result of his Antipater's intervention. And then Antipater himself was later caught plotting the death of his father, and so he also was killed once Herod the Great got permission from Rome. So already this story weaves with interesting intrigue. So Antipater is dead, and he kills the 2 rival brothers, Alexander and Aristobulus, but the children of Aristobulus will continue to play a part, as we'll see in a minute. So that's Doris, Herod's first wife. Then we'll move on to Mariamne I. Mariamne is the granddaughter of Hyrcanus, which means she's connected to the Maccabees, connected to the Herodian Dynasty. One way to secure power is to connect yourself to the people and the stands of the past. Mariamne's sons, as we mentioned, Alexander and Aristobulus, were Herod's favorites, but like I said, they were killed in 7 BC, and Aristobulus' children were trained in Rome. So his children end up to be Herod Agrippa I, Herod king of Chalcis, and Herodias, who's going to play an interesting story yet to come. And then Herod's sister, Salome, not the Salome who is the daughter of Herodias, but Herod's sister, she accuses this Mariamne I of infidelity. Herod believes her, has her put to death, and then realizes perhaps that she was framed and regrets the decision that he made. But you can't unmake that one. So there's 2 wives, Doris and Mariamne I. Then another wife, Mariamne II. Can't actually say it's the 3rd wife because there are 10, but we're concentrating on 4. Mariamne II is the daughter of Simon, again connected to that the Maccabean times. And she had Herod Philip, who never actually ruled, but he enters our story because he married Herodias, the daughter of Aristobulus first. So he married his niece, and they together had a daughter, Salome, who will prove integral in the death of John the Baptist. So we'll talk about that. All right, so we've done Doris and Mariamne I, Mariamne II, and now Malthace. She was Samaritan in background and had two sons, Herod Archelaus and Herod Antipas. And those two sons were also trained in Rome. It's an interesting thing. Do you call it education or hold them as hostages? But it means that you can keep the king in order in Palestine if you have his sons in Rome being trained. Do you see? So if they're not coming back, if you disobey, it helps to keep you in line. So those are Herod's wives: Doris, Mariamne 1, Mariamne 2, and Malthace, along with 6 other wives and 15 grandchildren. So at least we've got a start on the family tree. Now we'll move on to those sons of Malthace. Herod Archelaus is the one who takes over at the death of Herod the Great. Remember, Herod, in his final days of madness, orders the death of all the boy children in Bethlehem in order to try to get at the Messiah. And so Joseph is warned in a dream, and he takes Mary and Jesus to Egypt to escape the wrath of Herod the Great. The passage says that when they hear about the death of Herod the Great, that Joseph has a mind to return, and they are in the process of returning to Jerusalem when they hear that Herod Archelaus rules. And so, not thinking much better of Archelaus than of his father, Joseph takes the family back to Nazareth up into Galilee. So Archelaus ruled after Herod the Great. He was wealthy, but cruel and unjust. In his time, there was instability and insurrection, and the Jews actually accused him of cruelty. They appealed to Caesar Augustus, and Augustus banished him to Gaul. You'll see there's a whole Herodian presence that's going to end up in Gaul by the time we're done. So Octavian banished Herod Archelaus in 7 AD, and then Roman governors began to rule. So we have Pilate and others that will begin to be the Roman power sitting next to the power of the Herods. And so that's Herod Archelaus. Herod Antipas, then, he rules over Galilee and Perea. He was married to the daughter of Aretas IV, king of the Nabateans, and he divorced her to marry Herodias. As we hear in the biblical text, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. Aretas IV attacks and smashes the army of Antipas, and so there is some recompense for his divorce from his first wife. It is Herod Antipas then who's responsible for the beheading of John the Baptist. He is the Herod that Jesus stands before on the night of his betrayal, on the night before his crucifixion. And Herod continues to rule until 39 AD, in which he overplays his hand by asking Caligula for the title of king, and he gets banished to Gaul in 39 AD, and his wife, who is instigator in the whole thing, is banished with him. All right, so we have the wife Malthace, we have her 2 children, Archelaus and Antipas, playing pretty large roles in the biblical text. So now we'll move on to Herod's grandchildren, those children of Aristobulus that when his stepbrother caused Alexander and Aristobulus to be killed, his children escaped to Rome, and they were raised in the royal court, so they knew all the people that came and went, and that would serve them well later when they ruled. So we have the 3 children, the grandchildren: Herod Agrippa I, Herod the king of Chalcis, which is a town in Lebanon, as we'll see, and Herodias, who is going to play, well, here we go. Herod Agrippa I. He was friends with Caligula. Early on, he was imprisoned for not binding his tongue in a remark about Tiberius Caesar. but eventually he backs Caligula, and Caligula comes to power, and Caligula gives him the lands of Philip and gives him the title king. He is the one who accuses Antipas, and he is the one who gets Antipas banished to Gaul. And then the lands that Antipas had are given to Agrippa the First, so that Agrippa the First ends up with a kingdom just about the size of the original Herod the Great. Agrippa the First also won favor with the Jews, as we hear in the book of Acts, won favor with the Jews for abiding closely to the law and trying to please them. But as we read in the book of Acts, he died suddenly in 44 AD, eaten by worms, as it turns out. That's Herod Agrippa the First. Then we have his brother, who ruled in a city in Lebanon. He was married to his niece, the daughter of Agrippa I, whose name was Bernice. And so she was his wife. And then we'll see that when this Herod passes off the scene, Bernice connects herself with Agrippa II, which is coming up. So the third daughter, so we have Agrippa the First, and then we had Herod, king of Chalcis, and that sibling group includes the daughter Herodias. She is the sister of Agrippa and Herod, the daughter of Aristobulus. She was married to Uncle Philip, in which she had a daughter, Salome. We've talked about that. And then she was married second to Herod Antipas. And it was her wickedness, her ambition, that caused the downfall and the exile of Herod Antipas. So those are the three siblings of Aristobulus. All right, let's go on. Now we are at the point where we have the children of Agrippa the First. Remember, Agrippa is loved, even speaks worthy words that sound like a god and causes his downfall. One of his children, these are his three children, Herod Agrippa II, Bernice, and Drusilla. Herod Agrippa II was 17 when his father was eaten by worms. He was trained also in the royal courts and helped to bring Claudius to power when Caligula died. He was given the lands of Herod, the king of Chalcis, and the lands of Philip, and he was given the title king. Nero even increased his holdings, and he fought on the side of Rome when Israel rebelled and Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD. He retired to Rome, and he died the last ruling descendant of Herod the Great in 100 AD. So that's Herod Agrippa II. Then we have Bernice, his sister. She married Herod, the king of Chalcis, and when he died, she traveled with Agrippa II a lot, and there were rumors that they were more than siblings. There were rumors of incest between Agrippa II and Bernice. Then we have the third child of Agrippa, who was Drusilla. She married the Roman governor Felix, who shows up in the book of Acts as the one who has Paul jailed, and he's waiting that maybe Paul could be released through a bribe. So if Paul gives him a bribe, he may be willing to release him. But Paul doesn't do bribes, and so Paul sits in prison. All right, so those are the children of Agrippa the First. All right, have you got it? Let's see if we can look at a picture and see if this helps us at all. Here is Herod's family tree. All right, this is taken from a book by J.A. Borland called General Introduction to the New Testament. I actually studied under Dr. Borland. And so this is his chart. We see Herod the Great at the top. I took a photo of this right out of his book. There's his wives that we've talked about, Doris and Mariamne I and Mariamne II and Malthace. And then we didn't talk about Cleopatra for the sake of time, but she is the one who gave birth to Philip the Tetrarch, not the Philip who married Herodias, but the Philip who married Salome later on. Wow. All right. So Doris had Antipater. He's the one who uh, had Alexander and Aristobulus accused of trying to murder their dad, and they were, as a result, executed in 7 BC. And Antipater then is executed because he actually did try to plot to have Herod the Great killed. So there we are. All right. You can see that under where it says Aristobulus, there's the 3 kids then: Herod Agrippa I, Herod King of Chalcis, and Herodias. And now you can see the connections where Philip was married to Herodias first, and Antipas was married to Herodias second, both of them being step uncles of Herodias. So there's Antipas, there's Archelaus, and then under Herod Agrippa I, we have his 3 children: Herod Agrippa II, Bernice, and Drusilla. So you almost want to keep this chart somewhere handy when you're reading through the Gospels and when you're reading through the book of Acts, our 2 stages of the Gospel stage and the early church stage, because you certainly don't want to think every time you read the word Herod that it's always the same person. As you can see, they recycled names pretty frequently. So there's the chart, and I hope that helps a little bit to keep things in order as you read through the Gospels, as you read through the book of Acts, which Herod we're talking about. Here's the information on that book that I mentioned by Dr. Borland, A General Introduction to the New Testament. And the chart, as I said, came from his book. So I hope you'll check it out. Thanks for listening.